So I have been the bearer of bad news lately on this channel apparently because a lot of my recent videos have been about bad stuff happening. So I come to you yet again with more bad news that I believe the people who watch my videos should be made aware of. This is basically the reason why I took a little bit of an absence from uploading videos when I was uploading a bit frequently lately. I have been dealing with a lot of different things going on and taking care of a lot of stuff that kind of came upon us a little suddenly, more suddenly than we had expected it to at least. Because about 2.5 or 3 weeks ago my grandmother passed away. And if any of you had remembered the video that I made about my grandfather having Alzheimer's and not being in the house anymore, you probably remember that I had mentioned my grandmother in those videos, that she was still with us. So yeah, she sadly, unfortunately passed away due to many health complications throughout the last few months. And I made a post about it on Facebook. The people on Facebook that might be seeing this video already know that she's gone. People who are on my channel that aren't on my Facebook don't know about this news. So for both parties, I want to basically tell the story of what happened, how it happened, and why it happened. So back in January, right after my grandfather had been taken out of the house due to his Alzheimer's getting the best of him, we had discovered that my grandmother, at 95 years old, had an abscessed tooth that she had never told us about. When you have an abscessed tooth and the infection gets bad enough, it can result in a very bad infection that can go throughout your whole body, basically. So she didn't even tell us that she was having a toothache since before Christmas yet, and this is the middle of January. So we got her to go to the dentist or some other doctor. She got her tooth taken out, and it had literally a bubble probably about that big under her tooth that was all full of infection. So when they got the tooth out and they popped that, I guess some of the infection had gotten into her bloodstream somehow and had gone through her, which is exactly what we were trying to avoid. And it turned into a condition called osteomyelitis, which is an infection inside a bone. So she ended up with osteomyelitis in her jaw, right about here where the abscessed tooth was. Fast forward about a week or so, we find out that the osteomyelitis, the infection in her bone, had eaten through her jawbone and broken her jaw. So it was at that point that she was transferred to what was almost like a nursing home, but she wasn't in there as a resident. She was in there basically in the infusion center area of it for antibiotic infusions to get rid of the infection that was in her bone so that they could afterwards fix her jaw or do whatever they needed to do to get her jaw back together. So originally she was only supposed to be in the infusion center for 6 weeks. But it was from that point that everything started going south. She had the osteomyelitis that they were trying to deal with the antibiotics. 3 weeks into the antibiotics, her kidneys started shutting down. So that in itself could result in death. So they took her off the antibiotics and let her kidneys rebound and build her health back up a little bit more so that they could restart the antibiotics and continue from that point on. So after she rebounded, they started the antibiotics again, and she ended up with a gastrointestinal bleed, which is basically when you have bleeding in your intestines or in your bowel, and it ends up coming out when you go to the bathroom. So she ended up with a very bad gastrointestinal bleed, a GI bleed for lack of a better term. So they had to ship her to the hospital from there and get that bleed to stop. They stopped that bleed, shipped her back to where she started from, got her back on the IVs again, and then from that point she ended up trying to get out of her bed and face planting down on the floor and hitting her head on what I believe was the leg of the IV stand thingy that was beside her bed. So she had a big bruise from like here all the way down her face. So then they had to ship her back to the hospital again to make sure she didn't have a concussion and that everything was okay. She didn't break anything, thankfully, at that point. No concussions, everything was okay. Back to the original place, more antibiotics. Finally started finishing that up. They ended up finding out that she had a second GI bleed. So back to the hospital again. That bleed ended up being from the diverticulum, and that wasn't an actual like bleed as the first one was. The original one was from a bleeding ulcer that they said had been festering for a very long time and was finally just ready to let go. So that's where the first one came from, but the second one was basically just the aftermath of that. So after that, she ends up back where she started again, and it was at that point that they were considering making her a long-term resident there for a while at least, until she could get herself strong enough that she could eventually come home and be back to normal. That was the eventual goal. She wasn't supposed to be in there permanently. She was literally just supposed to go in there for her IVs, for the treatment for the infection, to get the infection out of her bone, and then get her jaw fixed and come home. Like, none of this was supposed to take place. So from that point, between when she came back from having that second bleeding, we found out, fast forward about a week and a half later, I think it was, we found out that she had a stroke, which was a big surprise to all of us. None of us expected that. We are still not completely sure what caused it, but one day she was perfectly fine. She was laughing and joking around. She was eating well for once, because they would give her pureed food that they basically put in a blender, because under their policies, when they have something wrong with their jaw or a broken bone in their face like that, they're not supposed to have like completely solid food. So she wouldn't really eat as much as she was supposed to, because she didn't want to eat the slop, as she called it, which honestly it was, because she didn't want to deal with blended food. She wanted real food. So she was actually eating, she was drinking, she was joking around, she was laughing, she was talking, she was perfectly fine, like she was rallying for once. And the next day, my mom went to go see her, and she seemed like she was real tired, like she was out of it. She just wanted to sleep. She didn't want to really talk. She just wanted to rest. So we thought she was worn out. And then the next day, my mom went up there, and she was like a vegetable. She was like trying to fight with the nurses. She was like clawing and scratching and trying to bite the nurses, and like she just like she was like an animal almost. And my mom told the nurses that this woman stroked out. There's no doubt about it. She had a stroke. And the nurses were like, oh no, she's just, being feisty. She's just fighting with us. And they're like, she's like, no, she had a stroke. You need to check this out. So they found out that basically she did have a stroke, and it hit the lobe of the brain that controls sleep. So she was unable to wake up completely for more than a matter of maybe a minute or two. She could not communicate anymore other than a grunt to acknowledge that she understood or heard what you were talking about or were saying. She couldn't open her eyes for very long unless she really forced herself to open them, other than a couple of times where she was able to open them freely on her own. She kept nodding off into sleep, and she basically was given a very, very short time frame to live after that. So that happened, I believe it was like a Sunday or a Monday, and she was moved to palliative care in the hospital, which I believe is basically like the point where they just make them comfortable until they're ready to pass. She went to palliative care, and she just started getting worse and worse and worse. And then I think it was like a Wednesday or Thursday, they said that they didn't believe that she was going to make it through the weekend, because she was really failing hard. And they didn't think she was going to last another day or two max. So we were basically preparing ourselves for, the inevitable. I didn't see it coming. My mom didn't see it coming that quick. We knew that she probably, at this point, wasn't going to make it out of the facility before the stroke because her health was just rapidly failing. But we did not expect it to be that quick. That was like, it was a shock to everyone. So she was only given a couple more days to live, max. But almost a week went by before she actually died. I remember it was May 16th. Me and my buddy from work were going to the Revelation tour, which was Oceano, Slaughter to Prevail, Virgin's Crown, and a couple other bands. We had gone out to a concert that night, and I remember getting a message from my mom right before like the headliner went on, saying that Nana's good. She's stable. Her vitals are strong. They said she'll be fine. She'll make it through the night. She'll be good. I'm going to go see her tomorrow. She said she was going to go to bed. So concert's over. We're heading home. I get home and I find out my mom's still awake. And this is like 11:15 at night, maybe 11:30. And my mom said she went to bed like maybe an hour before that. So I'm thinking either maybe the dog had to go out or she got a call about something bad. So I come into the house to the news that my grandmother had passed away very suddenly. The nurse that was with her, she was in her room, she said that she had no signs of anything going wrong. There was no posturing or modeling, as they call it. No change in color, no change in temperature. Everything was just perfectly normal. And she was doing something and she turned around and she was dead. So she just went peacefully, which is honestly, I think, the best way to go. But it was just so strange to me that, there was no signs. It was quick, and it was so quick that they couldn't even notify my mom to come down and see her before she died. And I find it so weird that she waited until we were on our way home from the concert before she decided to let go. Because me and my buddy were worried about being able to make the concert because we didn't know if my grandmother was going to pass on yet or not for sure, and if the funeral was going to end up on that day or something was going to happen that we weren't going to be able to go, which that had been going through our minds for like a week prior. And my mom had told my grandmother when she would go up to see her like 2 or 3 days in a row that we were planning on going to the concert. And my grandmother would give a grunt because she couldn't really communicate at that point anymore, in almost like agreement, like signaling that it was okay, and that she would be fine. And we ended up going, and my mom told her that day when we were out in Pittsburgh that we had gone, and she had given like an excited sort of moan, like, oh good, they actually went. And then it was that night she waited till we were basically almost home before she passed away. And I'm not much of a spiritual person, I'm not much of a religious person, but they've always said that it's almost like people that are about to die are able to control when they're ready to pass. And it's like they can hold out as long as they want to. They can hold on as long as they can, almost, before they actually go. And if that's the case, it's surprising to me that she waited until right then. It's still a hard pill to swallow. I mean, we had been expecting it for so long. I had been expecting it at least for so long that I'm kind of at peace with the whole thing. Well, she hadn't even been home since like February when she went into the facility, the first one. And this was the middle of May, so I had been used to her not even being around, really. So I think that kind of helped with, you know, being okay with the whole thing. And just knowing that she's not in all the pain and the suffering and the torment and the torture that she was going through. Knowing that she's not dealing with that anymore is kind of a consolation to me. But it's strange to fathom that, you know, it's something that I knew would happen in my life, but it's something that I never imagined actually happening. Like, it was something I never thought that I would see, although I knew that at one point in my life I would see that day, if that made any sense. Yeah, of course she's going to be missed. She's madly missed by all of us, by the whole family, by everybody that remains still on this earth, the newer. She is missed, and she always will be missed and loved very much. But it was a very sad thing, one of the saddest things I had ever gone through in my life. But she's at peace now. At the funeral, I ended up taking on a task that I also had never imagined doing in my life, which was writing and delivering a full eulogy to my grandmother at the funeral. You know, we had all seen that episode of Everybody Loves Raymond when Ray had gotten caught writing a eulogy for his father just on the fly when he was still alive, and then being challenged to kind of make another one for his mother, and, you know, writing a eulogy himself. But that had always been in the back of my mind, like, oh, I'll never have to do that. You know, I will never be the guy who would do a eulogy. And fast forward a whole bunch of years later, and there I was, writing a 4-page long eulogy and delivering it for my grandmother at the funeral in front of my entire family. But I hope I made everybody proud by doing that. I hope I made my grandmother proud by doing that. But yeah, she's going to be missed very much. But I figured that I would let you guys in on what's been going on over the last month as to why I haven't been uploading again, because it seems like when I get on a streak of uploading frequently and, you know, getting back on track with this channel, something happens and I end up getting off track again and kind of screwing everybody over who's actually enjoying what I put out. So I apologize for that. I'm hoping to start getting more stuff out there again for you guys, and some announcements on some future stuff that you'll be seeing from me will be coming out very soon. So keep an eye out for that. And hopefully a new cover or two will be coming out soon if I have the free time. But thanks for sticking by me, guys. Thank you for sticking around and waiting for uploads and bearing with me on this hellacious last 6 months of my life. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.